You're listening to GotTechED the Podcast with your hosts, Eric Guise and Nick Johnson. Welcome back, everyone, to GotTechED the Podcast. This is episode 20, called Quarter 1 Grading Tips, Pop Culture Lessons, and Being Thankful. In this episode, we'll talk about some ways to alleviate end-of-quarter grading headaches. Next, we'll discuss some ways to enhance student interest by integrating pop culture into lesson design. In the spirit of the season, we'll also take a moment to be thankful for the successes of some of our former students and what this can provide our current classes. As always, we'll end the show with another tech battle royale. Here we go.
Nick, we're back. Episode 20.
We made it. Can you believe 20 episodes?
2-0. Honest Abe would say that's a score.
I'm excited to kick off our 20th one of these things.
So we're already almost at Thanksgiving. This is insane. This is crazy. Quarter 1 of the 2018-2019 year is finito.
Yeah, it's like 2 benchmarks today. 20th episode, check it off the list. Marking period 1, quarter 1, whatever your school calls it, also checked off the list. Almost. I know technically it ended, but for the teachers it hasn't ended because grades are not due until this coming Monday, which means, I know you don't grade that many things anymore, but you know what that means, right?
What does that mean? I mean, I'm out of practice apparently, so go ahead.
It means that even though the marking period is over, it is
grading season.
It is grading season.
It is grading season, and I know some teachers like to give their quarterly exams at the end of each quarter, and in these exams, it's almost like mini finals.
Right. It's also the time of year when the students start checking their grades and maybe considering, wow, I probably should have tried a little bit harder or performed a little bit better on some of these things, and then finding ways to help their grades, and they start kind of checking in with teachers and asking if they can redo things. We've talked before about the second chance learning policy we have, so maybe there's some retaking of assessments happening. The point is, it's a really super busy, stressful time for teachers to get all this grading finished.
So we have different types of grading, obviously. We have our multiple choice, and there's ways to get around grading multiple choice, such as Scantrons, online assessments, and things like that. So some of the things that I've used in the past for online grading of multiple choices, Sophia.org, that was a good one. Allows you to embed a YouTube video in there, ask some questions. Students take it, automatically gives them a score. I like Sophia.org. We also use Flubaroo for Google Forms. It's an extension. Now that Google Forms allows you to grade your own multiple choice questions right inside of there, Flubaroo is kind of a little outdated, a little outsourced, but I think we need to really get into talking about some of the things that take a little bit longer, such as the essays. But before we do that, I know you've been raving about this app, this tech tool that helps you grade multiple choice.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of like, and I can't take total credit for this. It's actually a colleague of mine that uses it. I haven't started to yet, but it seems pretty cool, and she does swear by it, and I'm just kind of spreading the word for her as much as possible. It's called ZipGrade, and ZipGrade, they have several different services, but one of the things they offer is an app on your phone, and ZipGrade has a special Scantron form, just like you would get, but it saves you the hassle of having to walk down to wherever your school keeps a Scantron machine, because all you do is once the students bubble in their responses, at least as long as it's a multiple choice test, you hold your phone, you open up the app obviously, but hold your phone over ZipGrade's special response form, and it automatically detects where the pencil marks are, and it gives you a score automatically with the time-saving benefit, like I said, of not having to have or go find a Scantron machine. Downside would be, I guess a Scantron machine does automatically print the score on the form for you, so you don't have to actually write anything. With this, it's just on your phone, so you do have to write that score on the test yourself if you plan on handing it back for feedback. But ZipGrade's a pretty cool way to save yourself some time if you're doing multiple choice tests.
I just want to jump in there because I knew nothing about this tool. I've known nothing. I've heard, maybe whispers of something like it being addressed, but I've never used it. I've never came across it. But one thing that is kind of cool with that is teacher puts in the Scantron, uses their phone to grade it. They put the grade up at the top. This second chance learning is allowing them to actually take an honest assessment again. If the right or wrong answers aren't there, then they have to study the material again and maybe grasping it a little better. And that might also save the teachers a little bit of time from having to change up the assessments too terribly much.
Yeah, that's true, because I guess they're not getting, they can't see the any markings for what was wrong and right, so it kind of forces them to just study from a fresh perspective. So yeah, ZipGrade might be useful, and I don't know if it does this yet, but as what happens a lot of times with stuff like this, I know these companies are always looking for places to expand, so I would not be surprised if ZipGrade doesn't already have or won't soon have ways to export those grades automatically to maybe whatever learning management system your school uses. So maybe we could look forward to that to make it even more, a little more user-friendly in terms of time.
So let's just go over a couple other different ways to give feedback. And one of the ways that we've talked about in the past are rubrics. We talk a little bit about rubrics. In one episode, we talked about grade inflation because, everyone's 5 are generally the minimum requirements. And we need to slide that over and make it to 3. But let's talk about some ways that we can actually use rubrics while they're writing like online essays, or they're handing in an essay. Say you're an English teacher and you just collected a whole bunch of essays.
This is your Google Keep thing, right?
Google Keep is a great one. Yeah. So you can make your rubrics be little notes in Google Keep, and then Google Keep, you could move that right over to Google Docs, so you can open up your Google Keep notes in Google Docs and just drag them right over. I saw this neat professional development last year. I'm trying to think of where it was. I think it was in South Jersey. Not 100% sure, but it was one of the Google camps, I think.
Okay.
And someone showed me how they make scratch and sniff stickers, but this is a little off topic, but I think it's super cool.
Yeah, sure.
Using Google Keep. So basically anything that you throw into Google Keep, you could drag and put into a Google Doc. So
without typing it, you mean? It's just there.
You just drag it right over. So what I would do is I would use my rubric. I would come up with the different categories, and I would just drag it over.
Right.
Which one they've earned.
This is actually really cool. It took me a while to understand what you were talking about until I saw you do it at our presentation a couple weeks ago. But man, anyone who's ever argued against online grading when there's rubrics involved, this really does fix that. My thing with rubrics was always, it's so easy to just print off a bunch of copies and then circle whatever category I think they fall into. It takes maybe 30 seconds per rubric to grade super fast. This is the same, but it does that electronically. You're just not circling the where the two criteria meet on the rubric to give them their score. You're dragging and dropping one of your Google Keep notes to give the kids the same feedback. I fully endorse this Google Keep method. It's really super easy.
See, what I like to do is I like to have a couple different tools in my pocket. So if I'm grading an essay, I could do Google Keep. The other thing I could do is Checkmark, which is to make my own canned comments.
Right.
And we've gone over that before. But the other one that we haven't talked about is Talk and Comment. It's an extension, and basically what it allows you to do is record your voice to give feedback. And you do it right in the Google Doc. You download Talk and Comment. A little microphone comes up to the right, you click on it, and you start giving your verbal feedback. So say you wanted to drag a rubric in from Google Keep into their document, and then you can give them verbal feedback for each one of the categories. If you're doing a claims evidence reasoning, you could do your claim was well supported, it earned a 4 out of 5. One thing that you could have approved on there was whatever it is. Then you go to the evidence. You found some great evidence to support your claim. However, all these are from invalid internet sources, non-scholarly internet sources.
Right.
Your reasoning, you used the data that you collected wisely, and it supported the claim, and you got a 5 out of 5 there. So it doesn't take that long to say these things. It takes longer to write it all out. So it would save you a lot of time there.
Yeah, saves you the typing time. I know it sounds silly, but moving your hands back and forth to the keyboard constantly, which again, it's a menial thing, but over and over and over again, that kind of stuff does make a difference. And I think the one other one I was going to bring up was Kaizena, which does a similar thing. Kaizena, I mean, their tagline is something like fast feedback for teachers, something like that. I forget exactly what it is, but it's pretty much voice commenting, I believe. Do you remember exactly what Kaizena does?
Kaizena does a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, Kaizena allows you to do canned comments as well.
Right.
It allows you to do the voiceover. Personally, I think it's just a personal preference between Kaizena or
Talk and comment, right?
Talk and comment. And really, Kaizena wraps up Checkmark and Talk and Comment into one tech tool, I guess. But I mean, really what you need to do is take a couple of minutes, sit down with one of these tech tools and really see what it has to offer. Once you get into a process, all this time, the learning curve definitely shrinks, and it's going to give you a chance to be more productive while you grade. And it's going to free up more time at the end. You just got to get into it, work with it, and I'm telling you, this is going to help you be more productive in the long run. It's time to talk a little bit about pop culture.
That's an interesting one. What does pop culture have to do with education?
Everything. It has absolutely everything to do with education. We keep talking about personalized learning. We keep talking about being relatable to your students, and what better way to take current events or even past pop culture and bring it to life through lessons. So there's some type of connection or motivational piece to get students interested in what you're doing.
Okay, so really pop culture can just be a way to kind of get students to buy into what you're talking about, or maybe even show them how it could be useful in a real world scenario because they're seeing how it might relate to things outside of school.
Exactly. I mean, I used to do things with current events every Friday, and I would just pick one and we would talk about it. It had nothing to do with science.
Right.
Sometimes it had something to do with science, but we would just pick it. And then from there, once I learned about my class a little bit, learned what made them tick, I would try to really focus on those types of topics and see how I could bring that into the classroom. Sometimes if I'm explaining the rate of a reaction, the speed of a reaction, and how you have to get enough energy to actually start the reaction. So you're basically investing energy into a reaction to make it work for you.
Right.
You know, within your body systems, things like that. And if they had an interest in rabbits, you know, sometimes they get fixed on something that is totally what you think is weird. I don't know a better word for it.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, though.
For example, those little bunnies, they're little creatures. I think they were called Hatchables. One year were super popular.
Okay, yep.
With the younger grades, but for some reason I saw kids walking around with these Hatchables in school, and I was like, All right, so you're playing with a stuffed animal at the age of 15. What am I missing here?
Yeah, right.
But apparently that was the toy of the year, and they were super rare, and it was super cool to have a super rare toy. So then I started saying, all right, so you're going up this big hill with a wagon full of Hatchables. All right, that you're going to have to invest a lot of energy to get up that hill, but once you reach the peak or the activation energy, you're going to be able to go down with that little wagon. You're going to be able to do that almost like a roller coaster. You get to the top.
Yeah, you go over the peak, the activation energy peak of the reaction.
Yeah, and then you go down. It's a great time. Everyone has a good time. So I started drawing these little Hatchable babies on the board and everything. They're laughing. They're having a good time. But at the end of the day, when I went to go check for understanding, they got it. And a lot of times they would refer back to the Hatchables in their answers when I did like a ticket to get out of the room or exit ticket.
Okay, I see what you're saying though. That kind of reminds me of, I remember every once in a while I catch some of the physics teachers' worksheets or tests that they print out in our office and kind of leave behind maybe by mistake. And it always strikes me how creative they make their questions, because physics, at least for part of the course in high school, it's a lot of like, angles and your velocity and calculating momentum.
Acceleration.
Yeah, all that stuff. And I could see how that could be dry, but a way to spice that up to keep people interested, and this is why I'm bringing it up, is I always remember seeing them with all kinds of questions where they use like silly, funny things that are doing the acceleration. I think a few years back, actually no, this was recent, because Incredibles 2, I don't know if you know The Incredibles.
Yeah, I know what it is. I've never seen it, but I know what it is.
Yeah, well, one of the scenarios was, I think the little babies, I forget his name, it's like Jack or something, but Jack goes flying up in the air, and the first part of the question was, what if he goes straight up and straight back down? And the second part was, what if he goes at a 45-degree angle? And just these little things can make a big difference for, kind of pulling students in and getting them to be interested in what you're asking them to do.
It really makes the problem come alive a little bit.
It also reminded me of, this is something I've been doing for years. Sometimes the late night shows like Jimmy Fallon and Kimmel and all those guys, a lot of times they'll bring on, and I know we keep doing a science perspective on this, and you could extend this to other things too. They'll bring on guests that aren't just famous people, but they'll have, the celebrities there as part of it. And I know one that I use constantly is Jimmy Fallon brings this guy from some science museum out of New York, and whenever this guy comes on as a guest, his whole thing is doing really cool, engaging science demos, but he's doing it there on the Jimmy Fallon set with whatever celebrity is there. And I show those whenever I can if it relates to something I'm teaching, because maybe just the fact that a kid sees a face they recognize, that's the reason they pay attention to that thing a little bit more than they would have otherwise. And I know they bring on like animal guests too, people coming on with like cheetahs or boa constrictors and weird stuff, so you can always find some kind of tie in there with pop culture stuff.
Yeah, I understand. During my bioethics class, we would go through the environmental unit, and I always chose that one because there are a lot of celebrity ties to the environment. You have Leonardo DiCaprio made The 11th Hour. There are other people out there that are animal rights activists. One of the movies or video documentaries that I showed in the past was The Cove with the dolphins, and there's a couple famous people in there. I know the girl from Remember the Titans, the young girl, is she was in that documentary. And what I do is I take those people to kind of spearhead the bioethical issues relating to the environment, especially if it's someone that is super relevant to their pop culture, because a lot of times you can get them to buy in just based on their favorite celebrity buying into something.
Sure. And here, sorry to cut you off, but here's what else I just realized this counts as pop culture. Politics can go there too. Politicians, a lot of people have a lot of knowledge on politicians and what they stand for these days, so that's another way to kind of get interest, and that can touch any range of topics.
So how can we take pop culture and put it into the activities that we're talking about are word problems and things like that, but how can we take pop culture and bring it into a more, I guess, long-term assignment or a larger project other than a word problem?
I know one way that I've done it, and this is, sometimes I refer to this as not so much pop culture, but it's more like an online or a YouTube culture, which I guess for a lot of kids these days, that kind of is their pop culture. A lot of the younger generations, they don't watch TV and movies the same way we did when we were growing up. They're watching YouTube and a whole collection of celebrities that aren't on mainstream television. They just have their own YouTube channel, and they're just as famous as anybody else, but just in that world. In particular, I do a stop motion video project in my chemistry classes, and one of the ways I tie that in at the beginning of the project is showing a stop motion video as an example that these guys made on YouTube. It's a pretty popular YouTube show called Good Mythical Morning. It's just two buddies. I think their names are Rhett and Link, and they just do like a funny show on YouTube every week or a couple times a week. But they made a stop motion video, and a lot of kids know who these guys are. So when I pull that video up at the introduction of a project, they're like, oh, I know who those two are. That's really cool. There's that buy-in piece we're talking about, just to sort of get the whole project rolling. So that's one way you can use it almost as like an example of a product.
Yeah, YouTube is definitely a very powerful tool in education, especially if you could find these creative ways to use it. One of the ways I like to bring in pop culture, and we talked about Your Amazing Race in the past, but taking these popular game shows and making them a reality in your class the best you can. I know it's sometimes very time-consuming and difficult, but if you're working working within a PLC or with a group of friends or something like that are teachers, you can really divide and conquer. One of the things I want to bring back, and this is one of my favorite TV shows to watch. Granted, I'm from the country. We didn't have a whole lot of TV stations. We used an antenna. Our satellite dish in our backyard looks like something that you would see on the moon. I mean, it was like a 12-foot radius satellite dish, not something small that you would put on the top of your house. So
right.
We're going back. It's dating me a little bit, but where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
Yeah, I love that show too, though, dude. That was awesome.
So I'll just kind of brainstorm out loud. We had a colleague that went from our high school and went to our middle school. And she, I know, listens to the podcast every once in a while. So we'll give her an indirect shout out, or maybe a direct shout out. We could do it. Jamie Courts, which is now Jamie Gardner. She has a unit that we were talking about what we could do to kind of spice it up a little bit. And I'm thinking that this is the perfect opportunity to do this. But what I want to do is I want to take the 3 teachers that teach this, and I want them to be part of the little video series. So maybe I get them to use Flipgrid to kind of play a part. Maybe they're the 3 criminals and they have to go catch them.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Something like that. And what they'll do is they'll introduce like the little small challenges. So if they're doing the westward movement as their topic, one of them will talk about the gold rush, and, there'll be a little challenge there, and they'll have to stop at different places along the way and, kind of put the timestamp on it, but also do these little activities that are going to get them the information that they need to better understand the concept. So by bringing these 3 people in, the 3 teachers, as a YouTube video, pop culture, I'm going to expand the borders here. A lot of students really, really like seeing teachers in a different way other than being the person in front of the class.
Sure.
So if you get them acting silly on camera, there's nothing better than that.
Yep.
And that in itself, I think, is some type of pop culture in a way.
Well, teachers are kind of like super minor level celebrities within a school. Everybody knows who they are, at least. You know what I mean? So like you said, when you get a teacher doing something out of the ordinary, that's a huge buy-in. So you can use it in the same way as a pop culture.
So what I'm thinking is we'll get them involved. We'll have these activities that they have to do. It's almost like a choice board. In a way, it gives them several different opportunities to portray that they have the skills needed for that section. And then at the end, depending how well they score, that will say whether or not they caught the criminals. Maybe they caught 1 out of the 3. Who knows? There's plenty of options here, but I'm just thinking out loud and thinking how I could bring this to life while collaborating with people that know the content way better than I do.
That's great. Yeah, game shows is an easy way to bring in pop culture reference. So I think we brought up some pretty cool stuff here, whether it's, game shows, politicians, musicians. Music is a whole nother one we didn't go to. It's really easy to introduce music as almost as a form of poetry, looking at the lyrics of a particular song, make it a super popular song, tie that song in with other more classic things, and it's just a way to kind of tie in that pop culture piece from even a different angle. So definitely consider some of these options, whether it's YouTube or TV, movies, music, politics, whatever you want, even the teachers within the school, to bring in some pop culture to your lessons. You can follow GotTechED outside the podcast at gottech.com or on Twitter at WeGotTechED.
As we mentioned before, we're getting pretty close to the Thanksgiving holiday, and one of the things I like about the Thanksgiving holiday is kind of reflecting on things that I'm thankful for. And we also mentioned that our job can sometimes bring stress to our lives. Stress to meet deadlines, things like that. I think you could find similar stresses in a lot of the jobs out there.
Sure.
So if we just reflect a little on the things that we really enjoy about our jobs as an educator, I think sometimes that really allows you to see the big picture and realize that, this stressful time will just kind of go away.
Yeah, and that's what the holidays should be about, and this is a good time of year to do it, like we just talked about in segment 1, kind of wrapping up the first marking period, tying a lot of the knots and closing up the loose ends on all those beginning of the year headaches. A lot of that's ending and everybody's sort of settling into a groove for the year. It's a good time to reflect on some of that stuff. And I know this is maybe more of an occurrence at the high school level, but I know for a fact a lot of middle school and even elementary teachers. My mom was an elementary art teacher for years, and she gets it too. So what I'm talking about is when you regain contact or when you make contact again with former students and they come back and they almost go out of their way to get a hold of you or speak to you about what they're doing now, that by itself is cool because it means even though they've moved on in their lives, they're still thinking back on their education enough to reach out to some of their former teachers. And that's even better when they actually come to you and say that something you did had a positive experience on them.
Yeah, that impact that you have on them is priceless, especially when they come back and you see them as a young adult. I remember seeing someone as a 9th grader and thinking it was pretty cool because I had them again as a 12th grader and just to see how much they've grown over those 4 years of high school. And then they come back 3-4 years later when they're done with college and all of a sudden they're a biochemical engineer. Or, they're going to med school and one day they could be the person that, prescribes me something to cure migraines.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I just had one of these things recently. I actually ran into this girl, her mother actually, in a session you and I were running, and she pulled me aside and was like, do you remember me? Do you remember my daughter? And once she started saying that, I did. And she was telling me that her daughter is now, I think, some sort of a chemical engineer, which is always so cool to hear because that's like, as a chemistry teacher, that's kind of my hope is that the stuff we talk about every day appeals to a couple kids enough. Even out of the 100 kids I teach for the year, if even 3 or 4 of them, if they decide that that's their thing, if that's what they're interested in, and then that becomes their life's pursuit and their career like it is for this girl, that's like the most rewarding stuff you can hear. And at least for me, I always feel like I'm sort of taking advantage of the situation, but my first question is always, would you be willing to come in and talk to the current high school kids? Because for them, that's super powerful.
Yeah, they see someone that they could relate to because essentially they were them just a couple years, prior. And to get that type of real world grasp is awesome. I mean, I kind of relate that to parenting a little bit. Sometimes the kid doesn't want to hear the father or the mother. But if someone says the same thing that isn't the father or the mother, they'll listen. So it's just another way of opening a couple doors to a couple students. For me, recently, one of my former students, she got a lead part on a off-Broadway show called The Hello Girls. It's a good history lesson. It's based off of a real true story. I believe it was in World War I, and the men overseas fighting for our country, they needed switchboard operators. Okay, and they found that the soldiers that were over there, maybe it was wounded soldiers that could no longer fight or whatever the case is, couldn't operate the switchboard. So what they did is they threw an ad out there for women to go from the United States overseas and become switchboard operators. So they took a lot of Bell Atlantic girls over there, and this story was based on 5 girls in particular who wanted to really progress the women movement, and they wanted to show that women can fight alongside the men, maybe in a different capacity, but also, they have what it takes to go over there and do that. And one of the messages was women didn't have the right to vote, and one of the reasons was that they didn't protect their country. They didn't serve their country in war, and that was like one of the things that they were trying to get across. And these 5 switchboard operators wanted to go over, and then once they were over there, they wanted to get closer to battle and closer to active war so they can show that women can fight in war with the men. So that was the whole thing. It's based off a true story. Don't want to give away the ending, but you guys can go to New York City and get tickets and watch the Hello Girls.
This was your former student. You said they had the lead in this thing?
She had the lead. It's a musical. Everybody in the cast was super talented, but I might be a little biased, and I think she was the best one.
Yeah. So I guess just like we said, especially during this time of year, but even throughout the year as it progresses and eventually finishes up, for all the stress and craziness and deadlines and sometimes unreasonable expectations put on teachers, it's important to remember the effects that you have on not some of your students, I would probably say a lot of your students, even if you don't hear from them, and just to realize and sort of keep in the back of your mind that that's kind of why we do this and what makes all that stress worth it in the end.
Happy holidays, everybody. It's time for the Tech Battle Royale! That's right. It's time for the Tech Battle Royale. This is where Nick and I go mano y mano, one-on-one. I wish I had a whole bunch of other stuff going here, but I'm telling you this right now. Lock and key, my friend. Lock and key.
That sounds intimidating. What does that mean?
It means I have a lock, I have a key, and I'm about ready to open up a whole lot of goodness on you today.
All right. Well, let's get into it. I guess we'll get ready to spin the wheel and go through some of our potential categories. If you haven't listened before, some of the categories we feature are things such as productivity, video, screencasting, student favorite, teacher favorite, spinner's choice. Could be anything this time. Guys, why don't you spin the wheel?
Here we go. Oh, it's my favorite.
These are always the weirdest ones. It looks like we've landed on spinner's choice, which means we could be arguing two tech things that have absolutely nothing to do with one another, which can make it more interesting sometimes.
Also, the vagueness of the category can really
Yep.
allow us to explore the space.
Right. But it's nice because I don't have to think too hard, because I definitely have something I've been kind of wanting to bring to the podcast, and this just means I get to use it. Do you have something for yourself?
Yeah, I got something. I mean, I think mine is more of a, something that is good for all stakeholders that make decisions in education.
All right. Well, that's interesting. I won last time, so I think if I've got the choice, I'll just kick it off because I am pretty excited about sharing this with everybody. This is going to be a little more towards the science side. I hate to do that, but I think it's a really great resource for any science teachers out there at all levels. This is actually out of HHMI Bio Interactive, which I'm just realizing I could have just done HHMI Bio Interactive as my thing.
Yeah, they're phenomenal.
Yeah, I would have beat you for sure. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to talk about one specific thing from HHMI Bio Interactive. If you want to find this resource, that's all you have to do is Google HHMI Bio Interactive. In the particular simulation I'm going to discuss, or that I'm going to feature for this tech battle, is called How Science Works. And it's just had me really excited recently because of a kind of a shift that's been happening for science teachers, moving away from how most students were taught about science and the way it functions in the real world, which is this thing called the scientific method, where there's a hypothesis and you test it and make a conclusion based on your testing and the data you gather. That whole thing is sort of changing with the current understanding that sort of in the real world, science is way more complex than those 3 to 4 simple stages. There's a lot of recirculating, repeating steps, making observations, asking questions, sharing data, reading about prior science discoveries. So what HHMI did is tried to put together a framework that is easy for students to understand because of how complicated this process really is. And it's hard for me to describe, so any science teachers that are interested in this, I encourage you to just go check it out for yourselves. The gist of it is there's an interactive simulation, and there's two versions, a standard one and a simplified one. I think the simplified one looks like it might be more for like middle school level because it leaves out some of the finer details, and then the standard one maybe your higher level or high school students, but it looks like a big giant infographic or flowchart. But the cool thing about it is each one of the bubbles is a different component of the scientific process. So one of the bubbles, for example, says making observations. Another one says asking questions. And what it allows you to do is click on the bubble, and the student can type into that bubble what they're doing to make observations. And then after that, what questions are they asking? And there's like 15 of these things. And my favorite part is that after they've typed in whatever they want into all these different fields, there's an export button, and it automatically sends everything they've typed in and creates a Google Slides presentation from that. So it's an easy way to share with the teacher what they've put into the simulation, what they've added into it, or to share with each other, or for class presentation. Somebody even had the idea of you could, share like a scholarly research article with the students and have them read it and break it down using this map. And then that automatic generation of the Google slide would just be an easy way for them to share their ideas. So I know it's a little bit limited for who it applies to, but I think for the science teachers out there, How Science Works is going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool, but I think you're selling yourself short. I mean, just saying it's a science app, I think you can use that in a lot of different ways across the subjects. I do think it's relevant there. Totally. But anyway, I think mine's still better.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go right into it. And mine's think of it as like a database for all things education. What I mean by that is it's a product index, and it's called EdSurge. It comes off of the edsurge.com website, and if you go down to the very bottom and you go to product reviews, it's pretty cool. It breaks things down into 5 different categories: curriculum products, teacher needs, educational operations, post-secondary, and everything else. So if you're an administrator, you're going to find this useful. If you're a teacher, you're going to find this useful. If you're in post-secondary education, you're going to find this useful. I find it very useful. And let me tell you why. So you have all these products under these categories. So for example, curriculum products, some of the products that are listed underneath there, they're broken down into kind of like topics: 21st century skills, the arts, engineering, language arts, language learning, math, science, social studies. And then you see these topics, and to the left of it, you can see how many products fit underneath that category. So for 21st century skills, there are 63 products that they have reviewed, and you could go in there and look at the reviews for each one of these products. So if I clicked on 21st century skills, and I could see all these products that have been used that help you with the 4 C's of the 21st century. Now, within this search window, you can provide filters. For example, if you're a high school teacher and you want to just look at the products for high school teachers, you can do that. You can look at the curriculum type, and do you want this to be part of the core curriculum? If so, you could search by that. If it's just something supplemental, you could do that. You could search by costs or usage or tech requirements, all that stuff. Now, if we go back, some of the categories that I think are pretty awesome, I do like the 21st century skills, but you have collaboration tools, you have assessment tools, you have lesson planning tools, professional learning tools, video tools, presentation tools, you have networks and hardware.
Is this all tech, or is this like physical products as well?
It's all tech stuff, but
Okay.
it's also anything that you might use within the school.
Okay.
So, for example, let's go to the ePortfolio tab, and we click on it, and it's going to give you all these different products that allow you to make ePortfolios. So, Credible, Circled In, Credential Me, Credly. I mean, there's so many of these, and you can look at the ones that are the best reviews, and maybe that's something that you want to bring into your classroom, or your administrator wants to bring into your school. So it's pretty simple to use. It's pretty informative. It at least gives you an idea of what's out there and maybe something that you can use in the future.
That does sound pretty extensive. I don't know. How do you expect me to argue that?
Yeah, I don't know either. I told you I was going to bring the heat today.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess I could throw you this one just because, I mean, that's almost like an all-encompassing. Find out about the best of whatever you want within any category. Super easy and searchable. Just, all in one place.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I like it for is the fact that I spend a lot of time searching for a fit for a teacher. They'll come up and, do you have anything for this? Like cartoons. I want the kids to draw cartoons or comics. I'll be like, let me get back to you. And then I go and I research, and I stumbled upon EdSurge. And now I can just go there and be like, oh, here's like 16. Let's take a look. Wow, this has 25 ratings of 5 stars, where everything else has 3 stars.
All right, well, that's pretty cool. I don't think how science works can stack up to the extensive use of EdSurge, but definitely science teachers or any related STEM field out there, check this thing out because it's a pretty cool resource for students to get acquainted with the scientific process. And for everybody else, for anything else, definitely check out EdSurge and check out Guise's upcoming victory speech.
That's right. Just slay the giant with EdSurge. Go over to EdSurge, look at different tech apps, different tech tools that have been reviewed by teachers like you. This week, I just want to talk a little bit about being thankful, since Thanksgiving is right around the corner. The holidays are a great time to reflect on relationships that you've developed over the years, current relationships that you have with your colleagues and with your students, both present and former, and think about those little victories that make our job worth it. And there are a lot of them, but sometimes they come in very small form. So as things become stressful with the end of the quarter grades, or we're approaching midterms or quarterlies, make sure that you take some time and you figure out what in your job makes you happy. Take a look at those little victories and you'll be amazed about how much of an impact that they have on your everyday teaching career. So until next time, you can visit us on GotTechED.com or our Twitter handle, We Got Teched. Till next time, be thankful.